Good morning, good afternoon. I am Renata Curi and I'll be the moderator of this event. It's a great honor to have you all here in our monthly webinar for official statistics for mobile data. I am here as a moderator of and I this is a event that is being organized by the Conference of the Americas and the CGI.br coordination. You may visit the web page at thehub.ibga.gov.br, where you'll be able to find information about future webinars and workshops. In addition to that, you'll be able to follow prior events records in case you have lost any. Today's webinar will address information society. Our guests will address how they are able to measure and quantify information society thanks to new data sources such as mobile data, MPB, and how that can be integrated to traditional statistics, spatial informations. Our three speakers are Brazilians. Each one of them will have 15 minutes to address. And at the end of each presentation, we are going to have 10 minutes for Q&A that will be addressed via chat. First one to speak is Mr. Barbosa, who is a electric engineer and he's got also a PhD in business administration. Currently, he's head of the Regional Center for Studies on the Development of the Information Society, CETIC.br, linked to the Brazilian Network Information Center, NIC.br, responsible for research projects to produce ICTs related statistics for the monitoring of national policies and international goals, such as the Sustainable Development Goals, as the SDGs, coordinates capacity building programs and survey methodologies in Latin American Portuguese-speaking countries in Africa. Mr. Barbosa, you have the floor. Thank you, Renata. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honor to be participating at this webinar. We are following really closely the Big Data Hub efforts, and it's a great honor to be here. I will give you an overview as how CETIC.br is been performing measures for the development of information society in Brazil throughout ICT's households. And then Maria Bueno from IBG and Marcelo Pita from CETIC will go into details about the use of alternative sources such as mobile data to the production of indicators. I will share my screen now. And briefly, I will give an overview about our background. We were founded in 2005, and our goal was to produce public statistics about the access and use about information technology at different segments. So we started back in 2005 with ICT households, and we started measuring other areas such as education, health, government, culture, and others. In 2011, the UNESCO General Conference, the 36th General Conference of UNESCO, approves CETIC.br as a Category 2 center to address information society themes. And the Brazilian government has signed then this cooperation agreement, and for over 10 years, we act to go beyond the Brazilian frontiers. So we work to Latin American countries and Caribbean countries, as well as Portuguese-speaking countries. So that is a 18 years of regular statistics public statistics regulation, better speaking. And here I make reference to our main lines of production, where we enhance knowledge throughout a number of publications. In addition of those statistics produced by us, we also produce analysis as well as academic articles, governmental articles, international experts articles, who will broadly discuss inclusion, digital inclusion topics as part of information society. Besides that, we have a number of programs, capacity building programs, in partnership with IBG and NC to support other countries. So then those other countries will be able to implement surveys about these topics addressing information society. We also have another line of work addressing laboratory of ideas and methodological innovation, which was key during pandemics, as led us to go after new methodologies for producing statistics, to go after new data sources, different ways to collect data and information, and last, analysis of impacts in social production of strategic recommendations and policy briefs, mainly in Latin America and the Caribbean, where we work in partnership with UNESCO and CEPAL. I also would like to share that CETIC, while monitoring information society, we perform a monitoring in 3 levels: infrastructure access, which is the basic level for access. And in the past years, we are adopting a concept of connectivity, which is broader than simply the idea of having or not having access. A second level, it's the use and motivation of the use of technology and motivation of that use, where we include their digital skills. And last, a layer which goes beyond access and use, which is how would that converge into tangible outcomes to guarantee citizens' well-being, how citizens will empower those technologies to guarantee their well-being. And for that, we'll have a number of participations at international organizations, such as the CAF, IADIB, ITU, OECD, UNCTAD, UNICLAC, UNICEF, UNESCO, statistics department in the UN, and also we have a partnership with the WHO. In addition, we have a great partnership with civil society organizations, with national statistical offices, which are the famous INIS, the National Institutes of Statistics, and academia. We have the ICT's publications, which are produced annually or every 2 years. We have the sector analysis, which are not necessarily quantitative. Some of them, they rely on a qualitative analysis of those technologies. And we also have the sectorial overview with the publications and articles that will choose those different topics, and the policy briefs and regional reports, which are done in partnership with UNESCO or CEPAL, with a more regional approach to Latin America. Within the pandemic, CETIC was so agile to design a contingency plan. In 1 month, that contingency plan was designed to communicate to our statistic users how the production of statistics would take place during pandemics. As the pandemic took longer than we expected, we had the chance to produce 4 panels about technology access during the pandemic. That was done throughout a web panel with internet users. Therefore, coverage is well explained with transparency as part of our methodology. With this new methodological approach, we were able to measure consumption of electronic commerce, telehealth, and many others. Remote learning, privacy, online public service, electronic commerce. With that, we were able to follow data collection throughout the pandemics. We have partnerships always with UNESCO, with the ECLAC, IBG. We have our annual workshop about research methodologies, where we try to explore as much as possible new technologies for explore data source, data collection. This is a workshop that takes place for 13 years already. We have another activity with a focus in the Latin American Caribbean, which is the digital transformation innovation, annual School of Digital Transformation Innovation in Latin America, with the support of internet and jurisdiction. And we have 2 continuous publications since 2018, which is Tech for Good, the role of ICT in achieving the SDGs, which is available already in Portuguese, English, and Spanish. And the last and most recent, since 2021, which is the free MOOC, available in 6 languages from the UN and Portuguese, a total of 7 languages, artificial intelligence and the rule of law, in partnership with the UNESCO and the Future Society, where we had over 6,000 participants all over. In addition, CETIC gives technical support and theme workshops as the one that we carried out recently in Colombia, together with the WHO, addressing ICTs in health. In addition, we have a jointly support with UNESCO to Latin American countries, which are implementing the UNESCO framework called ROMAX, which are indicators that will guarantee the universality of indicators. Now, talking about our main survey for measuring and monitoring the society, which is household ICTs. ICTs household survey is being conducted since 2005, including the pandemics. And this is a way to measure access and use. We have 2 levels of analysis. The first one is the household level, where we effectively will measure available connectivity in the household by internet access, network, Wi-Fi, speed, devices available at the household, such as notebooks, tablets, PCs, and those households which are not connected, we address barriers for access. For individual level, we count on different levels for measurement, use of ICTs, use of internet, use of mobile, indicators addressing digital skills, online activities, and for Brazil, we have two models which are not part of the international framework, which are e-government and e-commerce. There are specific indicators about the level of activity in electronic government and e-commerce. This is a household survey, face-to-face, which is carried out with subjects who are 10 years old or older. National coverage data collection is done throughout a computer-assisted personal interviewing. That is a tablet. As this is a national coverage survey with over 32,000 houses all over the country, that period will take around 6 months to be concluded. And within CETIC, we have a quantitative methods and an innovation lab at our department, which is been after new source data, where we make use of big data analytics or web scraping of Brazilian enterprises. We are modeling that based on data which are directly collected from companies' web pages. And in a more specific mobile data case, in partnership with IBGE, we conducted a pilot project in Brazil, which Maria Bueno will go into details about that. And there is a guide available to measure information society. That's an ITU guide in partnership with the Telecommunication Union to measure some of the indicators. But this is a beginning, as it represents a relevant data source where eventually we will no need a traditional survey. Such a guide was prepared by the Data and Analytics Division of ITO, and that is part of the task team on mobile phone data under the UN Committee of Experts on Big Data and Data Science for Official Statistics. In the next presentation, more will be shared about this pilot project in Brazil. Having said that, I'll be at your disposal for further questions, and the CETIC team will be at your disposal to keep talking about this topic even after this webinar. Thank you, Renata, for this opportunity, and I hand over to you. Thank you. Thank you, Alexandre. It's always great to hear about what CETIC and NIC.br organized together. Now we are going to have Maria, who is currently the coordinator for the Center of Documentation for the IBGE, Brazilian Institute of Statistics, and since 2015, she got interested in mobile data and statistics. She is a representative of the regional CDB hub and IBGE in the work group for the UN CMD mobile phone data task team. You have the floor, Maria. Hello, everyone. It's great to be here. And this time, to be able to share part of our work. I will share a case study addressing measuring internet access using mobile phone data. The first question is, why use mobile phone data? Well, that can not just add to existing statistics, but also generating new statistics which are not produced by traditional methodologies. And in addition to that, we are able to produce statistics with a with much more frequency and with a spatial disaggregation, with a greater spatial disaggregation, and also lessen the burden of respondents once that data access will allow to undergo statistics without performing that in a traditional way. As part of information societal context, let's consider that today the number of households with a computer is becoming shorter. People, they use more and more their smartphones for internet access, which was key during the pandemics. And but not only, even after the pandemics, the number of access using mobile phones didn't decrease, and this is a trend which may not change. Our case study was conducted in 24 municipalities in the metropolitan region of Rio de Janeiro, which is a little bit different from the metropolitan concept that we have in mind. It's an area with 13 million inhabitants and the second most populated area of the country. Two indicators were measured. I will first address one of them and Marcelo will address the second one. I will address indicator 17.8.1, which refers to the number of people using the internet. And we are going to use as a reference a household survey, PNAD Continua, which is a survey conducted by IBG. Out of 4 operators that we have in Brazil, we got information from one of those telcos. But this telco represents 40% of regional market share with a great reach. We had to sign a data sharing agreement with this telco, quite expected as we are dealing with private data. So that sharing agreement had to be signed, where we signed that that information would be used just for test purpose and would not be conveyed to anyone else. The period of this survey lasted for 2 months in the year of 2019. Data provided CDR, call detailed records, voice calls and text calls, and DDR, data access, internet access. For both the data, the attributes or data, date and time, tower identification, user that was anonymous by the telco. Therefore, we don't have any information about the phone number and the type of technology that was used by that event, if it was 3, 4, or 5G technology. In addition, we also had access to the cell phone tower with its identification, geo-coordination, and the activation of the active technology. Each tower may have more than one active technology.
Bien, como curiosidad, en la región metropolitana de Río de Janeiro, 2 meses de datos y una operadora, tuvimos 90 gigas de datos, algo considerable. Y si pensamos en Brasil, en todo el país, ahora hacemos una diferencia con estos datos. Si nos basamos en estos datos, si pensamos en todo el Brasil, 2 meses de datos, 4 operadoras, tendríamos 6 terabytes de datos. Y en el caso de un año completo de datos, serían 36 terabytes de datos. Es decir, que realmente esto es Big Data, ¿no? El volumen de datos que se procesan es muy grande y, claro, con los institutos de estadística deben estar preparados para trabajar con este volumen de datos. Y la primera tarea al acceder los datos de telefonía móvil es primero evaluar la calidad de los datos. Con relación a los eventos, tenemos que evaluar cuántos eventos al día, cuántos usuarios hay al día, cuál es la distribución de los eventos a lo largo del día, de la semana, del mes, el número promedio de usuarios al día, etcétera, para observar si están adecuados con el procesamiento, los datos con relación a las torres. También hay que evaluar la calidad, sobre todo con relación a la distribución espacial de las torres y al número de eventos por torre, pues en algunos casos, bueno, algunas torres estarán siendo desactivadas o un número pequeño de eventos y hay que tenerlo en cuenta durante este trabajo estadístico de los datos. Este es un ejemplo de la evaluación de la calidad. Vemos el número de usuarios al día. En este gráfico vemos que es algo, bueno, hay una cima, luego baja, son los fines de semana cuando baja, es algo típico. Durante la semana hay más llamadas que los fines de semana. Esto es algo normal. Probablemente utilizan más teléfono móvil durante la semana las personas en el trabajo y los fines de semana menos. También hay algunos ruidos al principio, al comienzo y al final del periodo. ¿Por qué? Por los feriados. Y sé que es increíble, pero eso causó un ruido en los datos y entonces luego volvió al patrón normal, pero nada que interfiriera en el procesamiento de los datos estadísticos. El gráfico inferior es el número de usuarios por hora durante el día. Este es un comportamiento típico normal de los datos. En las primeras horas del día, básicamente, no hay llamadas y esto sube, llega a esta cima durante el horario del almuerzo y luego se mantiene, baja un poco, pero se mantiene y luego, después de las 10 horas de la noche, baja. Hay un descenso. Este es un comportamiento típico normal de cualquier dato de telefonía móvil.
Here we can see the distribution of the mobile towers distribution during the distribution We understand that the highest density is in the city of Rio de Janeiro, where we have the highest populational density. So the number of towers is proportional to the population. In those more remote areas of the capital, we see a lower number of towers. But here we are talking about one single operator. So in those further areas of the capital, probably some other operators will have a greater penetration than this operator. Probably that's the reason why we have a few towers here. But down here, we have a much greater concentration, which is proportional to the resident population in this area. First thing to do is to understand the place of residence. That is done thanks to inference based on cell phone use. And such a process is understood as anchoring. So we establish the time that that person will be at home, and then we try to verify if there were calls or not during that period of time. And those times were from midnight to 5 a.m., from 5 a.m. to 8 a.m., and from 5 p.m. to midnight. With that, we understand what were the cell towers more frequently used in one of those three time periods, from Monday to Thursday. Well, behaviors could change during the weekends. That's why we decided to consider just Monday to Thursday. A tower with more events in the periods from Monday to Thursday, we consider them to be their home. Their place of residence was considered to be their tower, and that was our starting point for all other statistics. After that, we have totalization. We want to know the total number of users per residence cell tower with only voice events or only internet events, or for both in the two databases. We also try to identify per residence cell tower the most frequent technology for internet access. So these were the two indicators and the two totals that we got as a consequence of mobile phone data. The darker the color, the greater the internet percentage use. In the central part of the map, 66 to 98, 96 to 98, I mean. Down here, lower access, but yet 90 to 92. In the capital, access has reached 92 to 94%. That may be a proxy to the ODS indicators, as in fact we have internet access just by using the cell phone. Our measure, this is the only measure we take into account, cell phones. Here we have the main technology news. 2G, that's the worst access, green 3G, and blue 4G. This type of technology access will depend on a number of things. It's quite controversial in terms of results. This is the event technology and not the tower. The type of device will interfere in the result. the technology and the tower will interfere, and more than tower technology, if many people are using that tower. For example, in Maracanã, which is a football stadium, during a football game, there will be too many people accessing the towers around the Maracanã stadium, football stadium. That will degrade access, and people will not be able to access the best technology, which is 4G. Then they will go down to 3G and consequently to 2G. This indicator is quite controversial. Here we have some numbers comparing to PNAD continua. To the study area, we have similar results. In the first column, we have mobile phone data, and down here, second column, we have a PNAD continua. They were very similar considering the study area. Here, just the metropolitan region, the results were a bit different, but just 1 percentage point. And just to the city of Rio de Janeiro, we had 0.7 percentage points. So the results, they were quite robust, especially if we say that we are using just one single mobile company. Although this is a company that is responsible for most of the market. Some conclusions and final results. The results for internet use achieved using MPD are very close to that obtained by PNAD continua, showing that this methodology is robust. Those results can be used as a proxy for SDG, and they can be spatially disaggregated. We may have results for internal regions to that municipality, even for influence zones to each one of the towers. And the type of technology using MPD needs to be better evaluated, considering that there are many factors that may interfere on the result. Some acknowledgements to those who have participated, some companies who have participated at the survey. We have Position, ITU, responsible to organize the study, NIC.br and CETIC. And at IBG, I would like to thank the survey committee who helped us to analyze PNAD continua data and information technology directors for assessing the data and for supporting this project. Thank you so much. Thank you, Maria, for your presentation. Next, the third speaker is Mr. Marcelo Pita. Marcelo is a statistician with a master's degree in population studies and is currently coordinator of quantitative methods at the Regional Center for Information Society Development Studies. He is responsible for sample design and selection, quality control of field data collection, data processing, and the development of new methodologies, including estimation designs for small areas and non-probability sample studies. You have the floor now, Mr. Pita. Thank you, Renata. Good morning and good afternoon. I will share my presentation. This is a projects which we hope to leverage in the near future. It's a census, 2022 census, to be published by IBGE in the coming months. And we have some goals to have a more disaggregated information for the proportion of population covered by a mobile network by type of technology. Before I introduce you the project, let me remind you the increasing demand that we have for updated timelines and more disaggregated statistics on well-known indicators, which is the case of CETIC.br, where I am a coordinator and Alexandre the manager. People thereafter more updated information and with more disaggregation. And by that, I mean geographic disaggregation or by characteristics of that population that is being studied. Rural-urban disaggregation, which has to do with the geography as well as with the characteristic of a certain place, a certain region or household, and also disaggregation by gender, race, age, religion, and other disaggregations where the traditional samples are not planned to cope with everything. In addition, we have a demand on new indicators based on social behavior and or attitudes. As we have an increased demand for update information, new indicators, with that we see a reduction on the amount of resources available for the traditional statistics production process. To disaggregate geographically a statistic, we do need larger samples, and that will imply in more costs. In addition, increasing non-response rates are increasing for traditional surveys in all kinds of surveys, despite the collection mode being companies, schools, health institutions. If that is face-to-face, if it's a phone interview, a web interview, regardless. In 2011, Professor Dr. Robert Groves from Georgetown University, Washington, D.C., and former director of U.S. Census Bureau, he designed this ecosystem for self-monitored, designing a traditional survey data that will compare PNAD survey just to mobile phone data results and combining that to other auxiliary process and event monitoring. Combining these types of data is the future. According to Professor Groves, this combination is one of the solutions or the solution to continue producing statistics with quality and being able to disaggregate them and having statistics with more frequency, even including those indicators which are not able to be captured by traditional surveys. SDG 9.C.1, proportion of population covered by a mobile network by technology, data for Brazil is collected by Anatel. Anatel is the telecom regulatory agency in Brazil, and that is disseminated in a municipality geographic level. There is no population statistics, just if the municipality is covered and by which technology. Every month there is an update of the information. What are the issues? First, the population has not been updated. their methodology is started from the antennas, from the wires. There are some different technologies available in topography, but but as you overlay the antenna data with the geography and you apply the algorithm, they are still using the 2010 census by municipalities. In addition, that algorithm takes into account that topography that they have in the database for a certain rural or urban space. They do not take into account new constructions and other equipments that they may be constructed and which may change the way as how that antenna is effectively covering that resident population. In some municipalities, there may be a population which is not covered or by the disappearance of constructions. What is then our suggestion? We are proposing to combine a public big data and census enumeration. We have OCLA, CIMAT, with the EA NSO census of 2022. The idea is to map a number of measures of OCLA and the CIMAT tool by nic.br within those areas once they will be disclosed by the census of 2022. If a certain area has a measurement of quality that is covered, if not, we are going to consider of non-coverage. That indicator, if it works, could be calculated for intra-municipality areas, aggregation of EAs, which is not yet done here in Brazil. In addition to be done monthly, we could also allow to identify those areas with coverage problems that may take place even daily. What are the main challenges? First, OCLA database it's allowed to have a download of a base with grids. And those grids, they have a higher volumes than other Brazilian areas. CIMAD database released by enumeration areas, but with measurement location error in rural areas. And they have information about that area where the measure has been made. But the error margin is huge, especially in the rural areas. Both OCLA speed test and quality measures by CIMAT are databases populated by a voluntary measurement by an internet user. That voluntary we will try to solve thanks to some choices that I'll show you next. If we are able to have a good coverage indicator based on the census 2022 with the measures based in the same period of that collection, we would be able to follow that coverage throughout time. OCLA and CIMAT and the number of measurements by enumerations, we are going to have that information weekly, monthly. For the update population estimates, we'll need to develop a methodology where we'll be able to estimate where that population will be projected 4 years after the census of 2022. These are our challenges. What are the possible solutions? For Auckland grid measurements, as well as the error margins for the CIMAT, we will define EA number of Oakland tiles tests by the intersection of the EA and all grids, all tiles connecting to them, where we are going to adjust the number of measures proportionally to the number of grids. The same will be done with CMET data. How are we going to deal with that measurement being voluntary or not, considering the symmetric number of measures for all EAs included into the possible range of the measure? So we are not just gonna consider 2022, but probably as of 2015 to 2022 to understand how those measures have changed, to see if that is in accordance to the coverage that is being produced by the former indicator, by the old indicator. We hope that we'll be able to update population estimates projections for years after census 2022, considering the desired disaggregation and availability of official population estimates. And also we want to consider the World Pop database as auxiliary information for EA's population updates. This is the right time to have updated information in that period, and as well as big data. It's high time that we have that estimate models that will not survive for one decade, but for the time that they will survive, we'll be able to discuss new bases and new informations to validate those models. This is the methodology where we are going to have enumeration area census database with the number of internet quality tests by enumeration areas, and to some desired aggregations, we want to disclose that intra-municipality indicator as frequent as possible. Indicator 9.c.1. To be able to understand the Ookla database, we mapped the measurements to EAs to understand the fixed data broadband, to understand the possible intersection issues, adjusting that proportionally to the grid. Data here is from the last quarter 2021. Here, colored grids and the lines that you see below, they represent the district of a municipality of São Paulo, and each regular polygonal is a EA. Each sector will get a proportion of the measures that are within each one of those grids. And we consider that a EA is covered by a fixed wire broadband if they have at least 5 measures. This is the Brazilian map to the last quarter of 2021 of EAs that had at least 5 quality measures. The areas in blue are those where we have coverage for a fixed broadband, and the darker colors are those where you don't have fixed broadband coverage if we apply this criteria. We needed a few days to run that grid, the Ookla grid, We did that on a 16 memory gigabytes desktop. So that's big data indeed. Now we want to have a separate space in the cloud to do that. So that's it for now. This idea to combine it to the number of measurements, once we have the measurements in the EAs, we want to have them in the indicators of in the we might have a strong indication with the number of users at a place and the internet access measurement at a certain place. Those are important variables from internet access. EA, rural, urban, if that is a village, if that is a poor community, the number of households in that region, and several other parameters that we are going to have access after the census 2022 is released. Thank you. Thank you, Marcelo, for your presentation. We are so anxious to have the results published, and you are invited for a next presentation. Maria, you have already answered a question from Rodrigo Nunes. I answered on the chat, but I will answer loudly here to everyone. The question was night shift, if that was considered, night shift, if night shift was considered for anchoring. The algorithm that we used to establish a household was the most simple, or was the simplest, I should say. We just defined the time, and by defining the time, we are not able to decide the night shift. But there are more complex algorithms for that purpose. That was an option. We decided to do that. We were not able to invest on more complex stuff. So we decided to go for the simplest choice to establish household, to establish residence. But there are those more complex algorithms that they can consider that issue as a whole. We have a question from Esperanza, a question to Marcelo. The proportion of population covered by mobile network provides a potential amount of population that could use mobile services. Ookla data refer to those using the internet in a mobile network. There will be some underestimation given that the remaining population not subscribing to mobile service is not covered by Ookla data. How will you account for those population? I will answer to Esperanza. Ookla is a voluntary measure just for those who have access to mobile network and for those who have access to measures. The coverage idea is to compare to what we have in terms of official data and understand if there is too much divergence in terms of coverage and if that can or cannot be aggregated in the municipality. Well, Ookla for internet users proportion. I'll get the number of measures within an EA, and I will not adopt that as a number of the sector. Ideally, we will model that with data from a traditional data collect, such as ICT's households, but there are estimates. We even had a work with the Warwick University where we produced the statistics with EA, and the idea is to compare those estimates throughout a model with the number of measurements by a certain sector. If there is a useful model, we'll be able to estimate on a micro level the number of internet users based on the Ookla information database, but that will depend on us finding the right model. We will not start right away from Ookla statistics to households with the internet access. We are going to use the data based on a model with other characteristics of a certain municipality or a special area, which before were those areas homogeneous to the EAs, to compare to statistics that we have to the same region for a regional statistics, for traditional statistics, I mean, and for geographic areas. I don't know if I have answered to the question or not. Has the question been answered? I hope so. We have another question here from Fabiana. Are there any additional protection layer to identify users once they were pseudo-anonymous and not totally anonymous? Well, in fact, the identification of the user is not possible with the pseudo-anonymization. The only way to be possible to use it would be by the number of the telephone, and the number of the telephone is not together with the database. Instead of using the phone number, a random number was used to replace the telephone number. In addition to that, there is no other information that could identify the user, because we have the date and the time of the event, the call, the voice call, the tower that answered the call, and the code that destroyed the phone number. So with this information, it's not yet possible to identify users. I think Esperanza wants to say something. Yes, let's open her mic. You have the floor. You may open your mic.
Thank you very much. They are all very interesting presentations, and I'm happy that you are disseminating the work that we collaborated with you. So just an additional clarification with regards to the presentation of Marcelo, because the idea that you mentioned is you want to estimate the population covered by mobile signal using speed test and CMET data, right? So with the population coverage indicator, the definition that ITU has with regards to this indicator is like a potential. So a signal could be there, but a certain proportion of the population is not using them. So you can have maybe 90% population coverage, but you only have 70% of the population subscribing to mobile service. So that 20% is basically available for others to use. And if you use the Ookla data or the CMET data, which are speed test data, you are technically using information from those subscribers that are using the internet, because they have probably problems with their connection, and so they connect to Ookla to test their speed. So there's a big proportion of the population that are not covered by the Ookla data or the CMET data. So my question is, and maybe even a suggestion, you don't need to actually look at the methodology now, because it could be a big process, is you have to take into account the big proportion of the population that is not reflected in the UCLA data or in the CMET data, because of this potential that the population coverage indicator includes in its definition, which is inherent in the definition. So that's just a comment that I would like to make. Thank you.
Só para esclarecer pouquinho.
Just to make sure, we are not going to be responsible for Oakland measurement as covered people. But if in our EA sector, we will have at least 5 measures done by CMET or Oakland, the whole population from that sector would be covered by a mobile network. Well, that measure is voluntary, so there might be sectors where the coverage is so excellent that no one has ever measured that area, and then I'm going to consider that area as not being measured. Therefore, we are not going to be responsible for a quantitative measure. Our initial threshold was of 5 EAs. If they have at least 5 measures carried out, we will consider that the whole population of that sector, they have potential to internet access, and that population will be part of our estimates. We are not going to adopt exactly the number of measures used just as a cutoff. We still have a challenge that the measures will be voluntary. We'll have those sectors where we are going to have a number of measures lower than the cutoff. They have coverage, but I will consider them as not being covered. And the whole population in that EA sector, they will be estimated as not being covered, but they will use a different estimate. We are going to use just one indicator. If they have more than X measures, that sector is covered. If they don't have more than X measures, that sector is not covered. What matters is the total population of the sector and not the number of measures. Maria, Marcelo, Alexandre, would you like to make your final remarks before we close? Yes, Renata, I would like to make a final remark here. We had here 2 very interesting examples as how alternative data source may help us to produce data in a much shorter period of time than traditional methodologies with quality of data, with safety of quality of data. So Brazilian statistics is progressing and evolving a lot. And we have 2 joint efforts. All Latin American countries, they have to join their efforts. So we'll be able to help each other to choose the best data process methodologies. So we from CETIC.br, we fully believe that we do need to make use of those new data source, new methodologies to be able to face traditional methodologies challenges, such as the constant short of data management. In the seminar, we had real and concrete examples that this is possible. And I'd like to thank Big Data Hub, UN Big Data Hub in Brazil, and IBG for this opportunity to foster this debate. Thank you so much. Nothing else to add, Renata. Thank you. Sinara would like to reach you and get in touch Yes, you may get in touch with Maria, or you may access the hub web page, and you may send an email to the regional hub, and then we'll give you a feedback. We'll reply to you. The videos with the audios of the simultaneous interpretation in English, Spanish, and Portuguese will be available at the hub web page. If you have lost anything, or if you want to communicate this webinar, feel free to do so. So you are all invited to participate at the next events on UN Big Hub in Brazil, and please follow the hub web page. This seminar is concluded, and I wish you all a very pleasant afternoon. Goodbye.